Welcome to your Quicksilver recap. It took me weeks to reread this book, but I'm hoping to keep this video under 60 minutes.
We did it, Joe.
To save you a lot of hours on a reread if you don't have time before November 18th, which is when Brimstone releases. So grab a snack, grab a drink, watch this video in 2x speed, do whatever you have to do, but here we go. Our story starts following Fane, a 24-year-old woman who lives as a peasant in Zilvaren, a classic FMC occupation. Zilvaren is a very harsh desert city with two suns, Belea and Min, also known as the twins, so it's perpetually in daylight and extremely and oppressively hot. The city is shaped like a wheel, divided by 50-meter-tall walls. The wealthy live in the central hub, while the outer wards crumble in poverty with little access to water. Evil Queen Madra has ruled for 1,000 years, and her Queen's Guard, also known as the Guardians, are extremely brutal law enforcers. Anyone who lives in Zilvaren who possesses magic is hunted down and killed, which makes this a very dangerous place to live for Saeris, who is hiding her magical ability to control metal. Saeris and her younger brother Hayden are orphans. Their father died when Saeris was 2 years old, and her mother was killed when she was 18 by the Guardians for carrying weapons, which is punishable by death in this city. Her life in Zilvaren consists of working for a glassblower named Elroy and trying to keep her and Hayden alive, essentially. One day while Saeris is out and about doing her regular old thievery, she's caught by one of the Guardians for trying to steal a small piece of metal, which is also a crime punishable by death in Zilvaren. In order to get the Guardian to release her, Saeris says she's from the Third Ward, which is notorious for being infected by a plague and quarantined. So the guard not only releases her, but also removes his gauntlet of golden armor that was touching her, throws it on the ground in disgust, and she takes this as her opportunity to steal it and make a run for it. She escapes by climbing over the wall and intends to take the gold to Elroy to have it melted down, so she can sell the pieces of gold to get out of Zilvaren for good. Elroy does not like this plan for a variety of reasons, but mostly because he knows the Guardians are not going to let this transgression slide. And he doesn't want to be killed by them like Saeris' mother was. Elroy was in love with Saeris' mother and has taken on a sort of father/mentor role to her and her brother since her passing. Saeris slinks away in defeat and heads to the local pub where she finds Irrin, the city's most notorious gambler, cheater, and smuggler, and he's also a previous fling of Saeris'. While they're having a little chat, Saeris gives the gauntlet to Hayden to bring somewhere safe, but unfortunately he does get stopped by the Guardians, and a fight breaks out. In order to save Hayden, Saeris kills two Guardians before being restrained by another, and is taken to the palace dungeons to be executed, of course. But before she's hanged, she is brought to have an audience with Queen Madra. Now, Madra is supposedly human, but somehow has been ruling this city for 1,000 years. And despite the fact that she is 1,000 plus years old, she has fair and flawless skin, golden hair, and bright, quick, intelligent blue eyes. And she's more beautiful than anyone Saeris has ever seen. So something is not adding up here. She begins to interrogate Saeris about where she learned how to fight well enough to kill two of her Guardians, convinced that the Fae had come for her at last, and found a way to train Saeris as an assassin. She apparently vanquished the Fae 1,000 years ago and now thinks they're back to kill her. She decides to leave Irrin, one of her guards, to deal with Saeris, but not before telling her that she's gonna wipe out the entire Third Ward, all 100,000 people living there, for being a bunch of insidious rats. And with that lovely comment, she leaves her guard Irrin to deal with Saeris. They get in a scuffle and he stabs her through the stomach, which should have been a fatal wound, but Saeris notices a magnificent sword within arm's reach. What luck. She pulls the sword out of the ground and strikes Irrin in the shoulder. The ground where Saeris pulled the sword out of starts melting into a pool of silver, and a dark figure emerges looking like death himself. The mysterious dark figure kills Irrin, then turns his attention back to Saeris. He places a silver chain around her neck, scoops her up, and she blacks out right as she's being taken away by the dark stranger. Saeris wakes up in luxury, no longer in Zilvaren, but she's in Yvelia, home of the Fae. The fairy realm is separated into these four major areas, but we're currently here in the Winter Palace in Yvelia. Everlane is the first character we meet in the Fae realm, and she is the daughter of Belicon Debara, king of the Yvelian Fae. She tells Saeris that it's urgent that the Dark Stranger gets his necklace back because apparently he'd been without it for 10 days already, and it was affecting him greatly not to have it with him. A very large Fae man named Renfis comes to collect it and leaves the ladies to it. Saeris then realizes that she's been unconscious for 10 days, and at this point she kind of freaks out. Right? She's like, I need to go home. My brother lives there, and that crazy lady said she's gonna put the torch to my entire ward. So I gotta go back. And Everlane is like, I'm so sorry, you're too important. My father is not gonna let you go. And while we're talking about my father, he requests an audience with you right now. So we must go right now. As they're walking to meet the king, Everlane and Saeris discuss the Corcoran gods, which Madra has completely erased the history of, so Saeris doesn't really know anything about them. Everlane tells her a story of twin sisters called Balmethan, which she realizes is the origin story of the twin sons in Zilvaren, Balea and Min, which is a clue that the Feyworld and Zilvaren are more connected than she thought, which is pretty spooky. When they reach the throne room, there are hundreds of Fae in attendance to watch this spectacle. The king tells Saeris she awakened the Quicksilver and opened the portal between their worlds after 1,000 years. The next person to come in for an audience with the king is the man who brought Saeris to this world, and he's called a variety of names by the people sitting in attendance: Living Curse, Bane of Gillethrye, Black Knight, and finally his actual name, Kingfisher. And it seems to be a shock to all the people that are there that he's alive and returned, because apparently he torched an entire city named Gillethrye and was exiled over 100 years ago. So it's a shock that he is back. The king is debating whether to execute or spare Kingfisher, but it's pretty clear he does not like Fisher at all and would rather see him die. General Renfis pops in to object by saying their army needs Fisher on the front lines of a war in Cahlish that's been going on for 1,500 years. But he thinks Kingfisher could really turn the tide of this war. So the king agrees to let him leave in a week's time once he has helped Saeris learn how to wake the Quicksilver again. Everyone is dismissed, and Saeris and Everlane head to the library in the Winter Palace. There we learn that Saeris might be an alchemist, and that the sword she used to portal her way here, called Solace, is no ordinary weapon. No human could wield it without burning their hands, which means Saeris must have at least a drop of Fae blood. In our library time, we also learned that Madra was responsible for stilling the Quicksilver and cutting off Belicon's trade routes with other realms, and there are also rumors that the heir to the Dianthus line, the family rightfully entitled to the Yvelian throne, is living in Zilvaren. And since Belicon wiped out the entire Dianthus line in order to usurp the throne, he has formed plans to invade Zilvaren to eliminate the surviving heir and to destroy Madra for cutting off the Quicksilver. Everlane tells Saeris that she is in fact Fisher's younger sister, though they only share the same mother, Edina. Before marrying the king, Edina was wed to a southern lord named Finran, who was Fisher's father. When Fisher was 10, King Belicon sent Finran on a mission to Zilvaren, and he never returned. And that's when the gateways were stilled with Finran's sword, Solace. So the king blamed Fisher's father for this happening, hence why he hates Fisher. He still chose to marry Edina, though, to prove that she herself was not a traitor to the crown. Ultimately, she ended up dying in childbirth with Lane. More on that later. This library session ended up becoming one giant info dump, including the things that we need to know about Quicksilver, so here we go. Quicksilver pools are pathways that connect different realms. The Quicksilver itself is volatile, and elders believed it possesses a level of sentience. It's very dangerous and will push any living creature beyond the boundaries of sanity. To travel through Quicksilver safely, you need a relic. Without it, you risk being overtaken, even possessed by its power. This is why Fisher gave Saeris the necklace when he brought her from Zilvaren to Yvelia. When one pool of Quicksilver is activated, all Quicksilver everywhere is activated because it's joined by a sort of ribbon of energy. On the other hand, all Quicksilver can be stilled by an Alchemy sword, such as Solace, because the magic essentially paralyzes the energy flow. The chain that Fisher wears allows him to travel between other realms and be safe from the effects of Quicksilver. However, one time long ago, he was forced to travel a pathway without it, and the Quicksilver took him just as it takes everybody else. A healer at the Winter Palace managed to draw out most of the Quicksilver, but traces remained, leaving a silver ring in his eye that occasionally stirs to life. The experience also left him slightly unhinged, and he admits that the necklace is the only thing keeping him sane. He also wears a special relic ring that helps him with maintaining his sanity. And to add insult to injury, he was obviously exiled for 110 years, completely alone, and now he's back. He has no rooms, nowhere to eat, nowhere to sleep, no provisions because Bellicon literally hates him. So poor Fisher is honestly not having a good time at this point. The Winter Palace is known for having the largest pool of Quicksilver ever documented. Bellicon had it created in the bowels of the palace to transport entire armies at once. And one thing I also want to note is the difference between Quicksilver and Shadow Gates. Shadow Gates allow you to travel around within your realm, and Quicksilver allows you to travel between realms. Now moving on to what we learned about alchemy during this info dump. Alchemy is now a lost art, but previously there had been 3 branches of alchemist. Fae, who sought to discover the path of immortality, Fae, who sought to create and invent by transmuting various metals and ores, and Fae, who sought to cure illness and disease. Alchemists were known to be able to manipulate one or more elements, including light, dark, silver, steel, earth, air, fire, water, salt, quicksilver, and brimstone. The more elements they could control, the stronger they were. Saeris seems to be the second type of alchemist, the transmuting kind, but unfortunately the process of transmutation has been lost over time. The gang is hoping that if Saeris spends enough time in a Yvelian forge, she will be able to run sufficient tests to figure out the transmutation process, but that plan does not go well. So Saeris comes up with a different plan: to steal Fisher's relic ring and escape back to Zilvaren, which goes about as well as you would expect considering Fisher is 1,730 years old. So he knows when he's being played. It turns out the ring isn't actually a relic, it was just a gift from his mom. And Saeris was about to go through the Quicksilver without any sort of protection, so he just saved her from a lot of problems. Saeris tells Fisher she would rather die or be tortured by King Bellicon than stay here and help him, which is insane. But okay. So Fisher takes pity on this dumb creature and agrees to go to Zilvaren to bring her brother back to the Winter Palace so they can be reunited. Fisher says he will try to bring her brother back and he will allow her to go home if she agrees to do whatever he tells her to do and help him create more relics. They make a blood oath and off he goes. Let's take a brief pause from our story to talk about different types of fairy oaths / magic in this universe. Blood oaths are unbreakable. Anyone who makes the oath has to do what they agreed to do. Obviously, fairies are known for little loopholes though. So when Fisher comes back with Carrie and Swift, not Hayden, he says he kept his end of the bargain and tried to bring her brother back, which means she now has to keep up her end and do what he tells her to do and make the relics. On the bright side, Carrion tells Saeris that Hayden is safe and living in the 7th Ward where he's employed as a store clerk, and Madra hasn't attacked their people, which is welcome news. When Faye turned 21, they kneel before the Firin stone and make a decision. Option 1 is bleed on the stone and make a vow to always be truthful and bound by their word no matter what it costs. Option 2 is to become a lawless Fae. Lawless Fae may lie, they may cheat, they may steal, but it would cost them a price too high to pay for some. And what might that be, you ask? Their honor. Fae can also give part of their soul to save lives, although it is an ancient rite that very few people know how to perform at this point. If the person who receives the soul dies first, the piece of the soul returns to its original owner and they become whole again with no problems. However, if the donor dies first, they're condemned to wait for the recipient of their soul piece to die before they can move on to the next life. They become trapped in a non-corporeal state, unable to touch anything or anyone, unable to be heard, but that's a sacrifice made when someone gives the gift of life, so it is not to be used lightly. And we're back to our regularly scheduled programming where Carrion, Saeris, and Fisher leave the Winter Palace and head to Cahlish, which is where Kingfisher was born. Cahlish is a fiefdom at the edge of Yvelia, and they're heading there because it has been warded heavily against Bellicon and his supporters by Fisher's dad, Finrin. He knew Bellicon was planning to usurp the throne and would likely come after him as a supporter of the Dianthus claim. So he created the wards, which still stand to this day. And this makes you wonder, if you're a fantasy reader, usually magic dies along with the person who casts the spells. So could Fisher's dad be alive? Cahlish, if you remember, is in the midst of an ongoing war with Sanasroth. Sanasroth is an enemy territory across the frozen Darn River, occupied by a very evil vampire named Malcolm and his horde of vampires and feeders. Fey magic does not work on Sanasrothian soil, so it is very much an evil territory. There was a time, millennia ago, when the Fey realm teamed with humans, until the Fey were cursed and corrupted with long canines and a thirst for human blood. They fed like vampires, slaughtering millions before the blood curse was finally lifted. Malcolm was the first High Fae to be afflicted, but unlike everyone else, he embraced the curse. When a cure was finally found, he decided not to take it because he liked the dark magic that the curse afforded him. Unlike his lords, who can only create soulless, mindless feeders, Malcolm can turn other Fae into vampires without killing them. Most of his vast army is made up of these former kind of like lifeless humans known as feeders. Of all the Fae who chose to remain vampires after the curse, Malcolm alone is strong enough to turn someone and ensure that they remain themselves. They become a vampire, but they keep their personality, their character traits, what makes them who they are. Malcolm only needs to bite someone once to enthrall them, which means the victim is bound to the vampire who bit them, mindlessly devoted to their needs. Once Malcolm bites someone, there are two outcomes. The person who was bitten can, in turn, drink Malcolm's blood and become something like one of his lords. Number two, if the person refuses Malcolm's blood, they die and return as feeders 3 days later. When one of Malcolm's lords bites a victim, they can drink and sate their thirst without killing them. If they bite the same human a number of times, they eventually become enthralled, whereas if you remember, Malcolm only has to bite someone once to thrall them. If the lords then decide to kill their victim, they have a 3-day period before they rise and become the feeders that become Sanasrothian foot soldiers. Silver can kill feeders, but only burns vampires. The only way to kill a vampire is to chop off their heads. At Cahlish, Saeris is desperately trying to turn important items from each member of Fisher's army into relics so that they can travel through Quicksilver. There are 15,000 people in his army though, so it's gonna take some time. And since she's not having much success, Fisher decides to take her to the war camp between Cahlish and the Sanasrothian border at Irrin. At the war camp, a fight erupts between Fisher and his generals, the Lupoprotea, after Dania accuses him of treachery for abandoning them as a group. The Lupoprotea are an elite unit led by Kingfisher, which includes Renfis, Lorith, Dania, and others. But when Dania proceeds to attack Fisher and try to kill him, Saeris panics because she hath fallen in love with Fisher. And in her panic, she shatters Dania's blade into 1,000 pieces, which horrifies everyone since the weapon was an Alchemiran god sword, forged with magic and quicksilver by Alchemiran masters. These swords were gifts from the god, but when the gods left Yvelia, all of the god swords became dormant except Nimrel, which is Fisher's sword. Although the blade is blackened and tarnished, the magic inside of it remains. And I'm gonna link a bonus chapter from Fisher's point of view about how he was bestowed Nimrel in the description if you're interested in reading it. I'm just not sure if it's a spoiler or not, so I'm not gonna read it out loud here. But it's on Callie Hart's website, so you can go read it if you want. Before anyone can really register what it means that Saeris, a human, was able to destroy a god sword, the alarms sound because the Sanasrothian horde is trying to cross the river and they need to break the ice so that they can't cross. Fisher wields his shadows, cracks the ice, and drowns the horde, and they return to the tent to try to repair the sword. Saeris quickly realizes there was quicksilver in the blade and that every metal that has called to her so far has had trace amounts of quicksilver in it. Back when there were plenty of alchemists and the pools were open to other worlds, quicksilver was imbued with other metals to make weapons more powerful. And it turns out this is why metal is so hard to come by in Zilvaren, why it's a capital offense to have metal, because Madra took it all to keep quicksilver away from the people. Historically, most alchemists could only command objects that were at least 5% Quicksilver, and even then, they could only turn it from a liquid to solid state. There are no records of anyone being able to fragment something the way Saeris did, which makes her the most powerful alchemist in history. Wow. While most people are excited that this could potentially turn the tide of war, Danya is perpetually pissed and thinks that this is too good to be true. But according to Ren, they only have 1 year left of the fight until Malcolm wins the war, so Saeris really is their last hope. Saeris convinces the shards of Danya's blade to come back together by talking to the Quicksilver in it. The Quicksilver wants music as a form of payment for being reforged, and it will require Danya's blood to decide if she is worthy of its gifts. Once it's successfully reforged by Saeris, Loreth is so entranced by it that he reaches out to touch it. The blade cuts him, and as his blood drips onto the metal, the sword recognizes him as its rightful bearer. So now it's Loreth's sword, and Danya is about as pleased as you could imagine a perpetually pissed person would be. When she tries to take the sword back, the hand that she grabs it with disintegrates because you can't touch a god sword that isn't yours. Now, bound to Loreth, the sword becomes known as a Visith, imbued with the power of Angel's Breath, a blinding light capable of destroying vampires, I think. Though the full nature of Angel's Breath is still kind of a mystery to me. If anyone has any more info about it, let us know in the comments. They go back to the camp for a short period of time before Malcolm's horde comes knocking again. This time, as they're battling the vampires, Everlane cries out for Kingfisher because she's on the other side of the river, in enemy territory. And it turns out that Malcolm kidnapped her and bit her 12 hours ago. And in order to save her, he requests Fisher and Saeris' presence in Gillethrye in 3 days' time. And if they don't save her in 3 days, you'll remember she's going to become one of Malcolm's vampire lords, or she's going to die and become a vampire feeder. They all return to Cahlish swiftly in hopes of finding a way to save Everlane. Meanwhile, Saeris starts crafting relics for the soldiers, now knowing she can bargain with the Quicksilver because it is sentient. This time, her method of bribing the Quicksilver and sealing each relic with her blood succeeds, and the relics are made. Telena, who is the resident healer at Cahlish, visits to see if anyone needs healing, and Saeris notices the same tattoos on Telena's hands that had appeared on her own hands after her and Fisher slept together, and she has questions. Telena shares that mates get tattoos as part of a Fae custom that mimics what it used to be like when true mating bonds existed. Unions between mates were blessed with marks from the Fates, but when the gods left Yvelia, certain elements of their magic died over time, like the god sword's magic and mating bonds. She also tells Saeris about god binding, a rare phenomenon that occurred between the most significant couples in Yvelia. It happened when the gods themselves blessed a pair, marking them with divine writing that wound around their wrists. And it sounds beautiful and fated, but unfortunately, every couple who was god-bound shared a tragic fate. And in every story, one of them always died. Great. Telena's like, oh, not to worry, dear, it's just a fairy tale. God bindings don't exist anymore. But when Saeris and Fisher slept together, god bindings sure did appear. So Saeris goes to find Fisher for some answers. And this is when he tells her he's known she was going to be coming for centuries because his mother was an oracle. He also tells her he's been calling her Oshalith after magnificent butterflies that only hatch once in any Fae's lifetime. They're very rare. They hatch where dragons used to live, and they mate, lay their eggs, and then die all in the same day. But the day that this happens, they sing a very special healing song, and Oshalith means most sacred in Old Fae. I do think that these butterflies are going to have some sort of significance in the books moving forward, so I wanted to mention that. Fisher's mother, obviously being an oracle, knew what fate would befall him with the Quicksilver, so she made special relics for him, imbued with powerful spells from witches to help slow the progression of the Quicksilver driving him mad. The team decides to send Ren and Danya out to find the, I'm gonna try to say it, Balqueter witches. I hope that was right. Because they might be the only ones powerful enough to break the blood magic that is binding Everlane to Malcolm. They do find the witches, who mostly are not happy to help them because Danya was rude to them, obviously. But one witch named Ishabel decides to help. She's the granddaughter of the Balqueter High Witch, and she's going to be on call for when their Everlane rescue mission begins. Later that night, Fisher accepts their mating bond, even though Saeris has not yet decided. Okay. In the morning, she wakes up to find him gone with a note left behind. He's going to Gillethrye alone, unarmed, to trade himself for Everlane. He leaves Nimrel behind, knowing that if Malcolm claimed a god sword, there would be no hope for anyone. So in reality, this is essentially a suicide mission. Saeris returns to the rest of the group with the message, and they hatch a plan for how they're going to save Fisher. Carrion decides he needs a sword in order to help out properly, so Saeris makes him a sword, which he decides to call Simon. TBD on if Simon has any special powers. While they're about to have a laugh about the sword's stupid name, a shadow gate opens from the ceiling, and Everlane falls right through it. While the gate's still open, Carrion, Lorith, and Saeris manage to jump through and get to Gillethrye to save Fisher. When they reach their destination, they come upon an amphitheater that seats hundreds of thousands of people, all chanting Anarath more, which means release us. At the center of the amphitheater is a labyrinth, so this appears to be some sort of gladiatorial games situation. The first person they come across is Irrin, Queen Madra's guard. Ariana, what are you doing here? He didn't die at the palace in Zilvaren at all. He's here in Gillethrye. What? And it only gets weirder because at the end of the labyrinth, standing atop a dais, are Malcolm, King Belicon, and Queen Madra themselves. And to make bad news worse, Gillethrye is a giant graveyard. The land is completely dead and no one can use their magic here, so how we're gonna escape, nobody knows. Malcolm, Belicon, and Madra make up a triumvirate, which Belicon describes as 3 crowns sharing one source. To kill one of them, you have to kill them all. Also, the war, it turns out, was just a feeding ground to sustain Malcolm's horde. And Belicon actually put the silver embargo in place to help save Malcolm's army, since silver can kill feeders. So he has been screwing over his own people for millennia. That's great. And thanks to Belicon's monologue, we finally found out where Fisher was for over 100 years, because turns out he was here in Gillethrye in the labyrinth. Malcolm's horde of 20,000 vampires had gathered at the gates of Gillethrye, a city of 200,000 high fae and lesser fae. Fisher's army had been drawn into a decoy battle to the south, and they found out too late that the real battle was at Gillethrye. By the time they arrived, the horde was already inside the city. All of the fae were gathered in the streets celebrating the festival of the first song. The horde swept through the city like locusts, feeding on anything they came across, either draining their victims or consigning them to an agonizing, terrible death. So Fisher decided to go off on his own to try to find Malcolm and kill him himself. But he didn't find Malcolm, he found Belicon. And when Malcolm arrived at the head of his host, Fisher realized that him and Belicon weren't adversaries at all. They were allies and had been working together since before the Blood Curse. Fisher wanted to bargain for the few citizens of Gillethrye who were still alive, so Belicon proposed a deal. They would flip a coin, one found only in Gillethrye. The rules of the coin toss were as follows. If the coin hit the ground and landed leaf side up, Malcolm would call off his horde and leave the city without hurting anyone else. If the coin hit the ground and landed fish side up, he would take the city as his own and destroy it. Fisher would have to leave those still alive to their deaths and meet Malcolm on the battlefield at a later date. Fisher wasn't allowed to touch the coin or influence the way it fell. While the coin toss was being decided, he wasn't allowed to harm Malcolm or Belicon, speak of this deal, or of the fact that Malcolm and Belicon were brothers. Fisher agreed to these terms by making a blood oath to Belicon. The coin was tossed and Malcolm catches it. In other words, it never hit the ground. That's when Fisher torched the city. At this point, Malcolm's horde had either bitten or killed everyone. They were already transitioning, and if Malcolm's horde gained another 200,000 people, they would have swallowed the entire realm. So Fisher made the decision to barricade the city, trapping everyone inside and burning it to the ground. That's when Malcolm created the most diabolical labyrinth he could conjure. He hid Belicon's coin at the center, built the Colosseum around it, and filled the stands with the perpetually burning bodies of all the citizens. And all Fisher had to do to end their suffering was to find the coin and make it fall to the ground. Obviously, it would be too late to save the Fae from death, but at least it would end their suffering. And then he would be free to seek his vengeance by calling Malcolm out onto the battlefield. It took him 102 years to get to the center of the Labyrinth, and another 8 years trying to find the coin in the center. Malcolm's powers allowed Fisher to not need sleep or food while he was in the Labyrinth, which is how he survived. I also need to quickly clarify how long Fisher was there, because in the ebook and audiobook, it says that he was in the Labyrinth for 55 years plus 8 in the middle. But in the physical version, he was in the Labyrinth for 102 years and in the middle for 8, so 110 total. So if you are confused about that, I do think it's just an error, and they might have even fixed it in the ebook by now. But let's just all go with what the print version says. 102 plus 8, 110 total. One day, while Teladius, Malcolm's son, was checking on Kingfisher, the ground shook so violently that the stone cracked beneath their feet and a hole appeared. And lo and behold, there was a Quicksilver pool below the Labyrinth, and it had been awakened. Fisher says, "I went into the Quicksilver because I felt my father's sword calling to me, and I knew I'd need it for this." Fisher grabs Solace and stabs Bellicon, and all hell breaks loose, and the gang runs to the Labyrinth to hide. The first trial they run into is a giant spider demon named Morthil, which they are able to successfully kill. Phew. The next issue they run into is Malcolm moving the walls of the Labyrinth as they're running through it to try to trap them inside. They do manage to get to the center of the Labyrinth much faster than Fisher was able to, and they come upon a tower of coins. Just as they're wondering how they could possibly find the real coin amongst this tower, Malcolm shows up and is like, "You guys are losers. All of these coins are fake." Fisher tells Saeris through their mind connection that she should be able to find the real coin because it should contain traces of Quicksilver. As they're hatching a plan to buy Saeris some time, Malcolm bites Carrion, and we're all like, "Oh no, not Carrion." But suddenly, Malcolm stops. He stumbles back, he's stunned. Carrion's blood has revealed a secret. Carrion Swift is actually Carrion Dianthus. Carrion's father's blood was used to create the curse that turned Malcolm into a vampire. No vampire can drink from the living descendants of the bloodline that created them, nor can they enthrall them. The blood of that lineage should actually also kill any vampire who drinks it, but Malcolm was so powerful that it only made his flesh fall off of his body, but he didn't die. Carrion, as it turns out, was brought to Zilvaren by Fisher's father when he was young to save him from Bellicon, because Bellicon was hunting down everyone in the Dianthus line, right? Finryn glamoured his ears and canines so that he would look human and told him to learn about the Fae and just sort of bide his time, but then the gates closed and he got stuck there. While everyone's distracted by this revelation, Saeris runs off with Solace to find the Quicksilver coin. The Quicksilver says it will show her the way to the coin in exchange for a small favor, and she agrees. She follows the Quicksilver pole directly to Morthil because the coin is indeed inside his dead corpse. Why wouldn't it be? She bravely retrieves it and turns around to find Malcolm standing there waiting, and he's like, "You better give me that coin, girl." And she's like, "No." So they get in a fight. Malcolm punches Saeris so hard in the stomach that she again should die. But Saeris manages to distract him enough that the coin falls to the ground and all of the souls are finally swept away to eternal rest. Saeris then uses Solace to cut off Malcolm's head, and that is the way you kill a vampire. Fisher arrives to save her alongside Teladius, who surprisingly turns out to be Fisher's ally. Teladius reveals that he was second only to his father in power, and he warns Fisher that they need to act fast because the only way to save Saeris from the mortal wounds that Malcolm inflicted is to turn her into a vampire before it's too late. Very Bella Swan of her, I might add. As Saeris is dying from the turning process, the Quicksilver calls in the favor it wants from her. It wants an audience with her urgently. Barely conscious, Saeris agrees and is instantly swept away into a pool of Quicksilver. When she opens her eyes, she finds herself in a strange realm, which we quickly realize is the home of the Corcoran, the gods that left Yvelia. She's greeted by two girls who turn out to be Baal and Methan, and their father is none other than Xaereth, the god of chaos. Xaereth is sitting at the base of a tree that represents all different universes, and his family are responsible for tending to the timelines of fate, and they are compelled to destroy any universes that need to be pruned from the tree. There is a rot spreading through his domain, apparently, and the infected realms must be destroyed to save the rest. So he waves his hand, 3 rotting leaves are removed from the tree, each leaf representing billions of people. Yikes. He also tells Saeris that he altered her fate. She was supposed to be born Fae in Fisher's realm, but as he continued to watch, he realized that no matter how the Tree of Fate was manipulated, Saeris and Fisher would always end up together no matter how much he could meddle. He says threads like you and Kingfisher that are drawn together and cross on an axis create a well of power. The energy the two of you draw together attracts an equal and opposite counterweight. Every possible future where the two of you are together ends with the vast majority of this tree dying, aka nearly the entire universe dying. None of us can foresee any other way. He says that while they're not exactly responsible for the end of the world, their meeting and mating is a spark that is going to start a chain reaction that could end the world. So what did Xaereth do about this? He brought Fisher to him when Fisher was a young boy, 10 years old, right after his mother had just been killed by Belicon. That's right, Adina didn't die in childbirth, she was killed by evil Belicon. Fisher apparently made an enemy of Xaereth's family, so he sent him away and kept a watchful eye on him. He spent a great deal of time studying the various outcomes and paths of the universe once Kingfisher and Saeris met, and while he never found a balance that meant good prevailed, there were pathways that led to uncertainty. He notes that in all of the veiled futures, there was one common factor. She and Fisher fought by each other's side and they were God-bound. Their God-binding tattoos mark them as the wards of Xaereth and protect them from the wrath of other gods. Her bargain, if she should accept Fisher as her mate, is that she must agree for the thread of her life to be tethered from the tapestry of the universe. If she does this, none of the gods will be able to see her or affect her future in any way. How is Xaereth going to do this, you may ask? He is going to transform her into something that has never been seen before, because the universe cannot focus on that which it does not recognize. She agrees to this god bargain, and Xaereth sends her back through the Quicksilver. She wakes up in Teladius's room, and she's now half vampire, half fae. Something no one has seen before, but she's not just half vampire, half fae, oh no ma'am. In fae courts, the crown is typically passed to a regent's heir. But if the regent is murdered, the crown is claimed by the person who killed them. Malcolm never named an heir because he thought he would live forever. And since Saeris killed him, she is now the vampire queen, and in 2 days will officially become the queen of Sanasroth. Okay. As for our other characters, Everlane is alive and should be waking up soon. Belicon and Madra both fled Gillethrye, so those losers will be back for book 2, I would imagine. And Isabel the Witch has been able to slowly tease the Quicksilver out of Fisher, so he's not gonna lose his mind. The end. Before we conclude, I am going to do a rapid fire of our main players for next book. Saeris, of course, is now a half fae, half vampire queen of Sanasroth, and her god sword is Solace. Kingfisher now is 100% not gonna die from Quicksilver poisoning, which is great. His god sword is Nimrel. Teladius is our vampire ally. He's the most powerful vampire ever because now Malcolm is dead. Carrion, who is very much not human and is very much the heir to the most powerful fae family and rightful heir to the throne, question mark. Dianthus. Renfis is the general of the army. He's in love with Lane for sure. We have Lorith and his god sword Visith with the power of Angel's Breath. Danya. Everlane, who hopefully wakes up soon, but now might be a vampire, TBD. Telena, our fae healer, and Isabel, our resident witch healer. And last but certainly not least, Onyx, the beautiful white fox. Bellicon and Madra are still out there, so TBD who like the main baddie is going to be in Brimstone, if they're going to be a team, but we're going to find out real soon. I also want to point you to the Fantasy Fangirls Instagram post with more slides of other characters if there's anyone else you want to brush up on. And I also am going to be putting all of these graphics that I've included in today's video on my blog, which I will link in the description as well. If you made it this far, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. It would mean a lot to me if you gave it a thumbs up and subscribed. And here's a cute picture of a kitten I've been fostering as a thank you. And I hope to see you in my next video. Bye.